My guest today is Brantley Ford. Brantley is the daughter of Sonia Boyd, who was media specialist at Shaw forever, I think. And her dad also, after 20 years in the Navy, taught for another 20 years. Is that right, Brantley?
Yes.
At Northside High School, also in Columbus. Um, she was teaching social studies when I knew her, and now she is at Chattahoochee County High School teaching work-based learning and social studies. And growing up in a family of educators has given her a rather unique perspective on teaching and on students. So, welcome, Brantley, and thanks for being here today.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Arnold, for having me today.
And first, I'd like for you to explain to everybody what work-based learning is.
Yeah, absolutely. We It's a program that emphasizes taking students the skills that they have learned and placing them in employment so that they can get hands-on work experience while they're still in high school. I think back in my high school days, they called it like co-op.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's very similar. I think it's a much more, from what I understand, much more refined program now, with things that we still teach the kids as far as employability skills, the soft skills. And it can be anywhere from kind of basic entry level jobs to much more sophisticated. They finish their pathways, maybe past the ASE for automotive, and in much more highly trained, skilled jobs. But it's a great program, where students, they're basically, their work time counts as their classroom seat time because they're learning on the job.
That's a great thing. I always thought, when I was at Shaw, that Bob Yarborough and his carpentry program, where they actually built a house and remodeled part of it every semester, was one of the greatest teaching environments I had ever seen. And then when I went to Chattahoochee County, the automotive program there
Yeah.
pretty much does the same thing. Teachers and people in the community bring their cars in to be repaired, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've taken mine up there too, and
Yeah.
that is a great service. You fill out the form, somebody collects your keys, and they bring it down to you. So it's a great experience for the kids, and it benefits the immediate and the local community. But yeah, outside the school too, people bring theirs in for the kids to take a look at. So
That's great.
it's great.
It's always great, especially on a teacher's salary, to know a good mechanic.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly right.
So, Brantley, are you originally from Columbus?
No, I'm not. I was We moved here beginning my seventh grade year. We lived all up and down the East Coast with my dad, wherever he was posted. But my family's originally from Rome, Georgia. And so dad would try to get us back as close to grandparents when he could. So he accepted a position as the commanding officer at the Naval Reserve Center, downtown, and then extended so that I could have the same type of high school experience that they did, and not have to move in the middle of it.
That's pretty
So
neat.
yeah, so I've been here since I was 12. So Columbus is home for me, but not originally from here.
Where did you go to middle school?
I went to Arnold.
Oh, okay, good,
Yeah, back
good.
when it was junior high. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I have to explain that to a lot of people now, exactly what a junior high school is. Uh,
Yes.
so I would imagine that growing up around dedicated teachers like your mom and dad influenced a lot of what you did later in life. And did your parents encourage you to become an educator?
No, they didn't. Although they had both gone into college and then outside of that as educators, because my dad did teach 2 years before he joined the Navy in the Vietnam era. And so it kind of put his teaching career on hold for a Navy career. And then but always was an educator at heart. And then when we moved around a lot, mom would sub. And then, of course, when we moved to Columbus, is when she started at Shaw in 1984, I think. So yeah, that was her first stint at Shaw. And but no, my dad actually was like, go be an engineer. So, but I had no interest in being an engineer. And I actually had, really like I was dedicated to a business career, and did that for about 10 years after I graduated from Auburn. And then about my late 20s, I guess, I felt the call to be an educator. I'm actually a third generation. My mom's mom was a teacher also. So I think just it was inescapable. At some point, it was going to catch up. And so went back to school, got my master's. My undergrad is in history and got my master's in instructional technology. And then had the fortune of getting a position at Shaw with you. So I'm still sitting actually in Mac McEwen's chair.
Ah,
So I have it at the house now. So
that's great.
um, yeah, had it all these years, 20 plus years later. So
Well, instructional technology at that time meant something different, didn't it?
it was in the very infant stages. Absolutely. It was right on the beginning of what we all know now to be like Canvas, or any of the apps that or programs that students use for asynchronous learning. And that was in its infant stages. And I was just fortunate enough to work for a company that recognized that that was the way that it was going. And they paid for my master's program to do it. So yeah, it was definitely a win-win for me because I picked up a lot of the education classes that as a straight history major I hadn't had it in my undergrad. But yeah, it was very different. Like it was say like coding in a very basic like HTML versus what the capabilities are today. And so yeah, there's not a lot applicable from what I learned in my actual classroom, but I think that's true of a lot of courses of study. But what it does teach you is how to learn and how to process so that you can continue learning.
Which
And
is supposed to be the whole point of education, isn't
it is very much so. Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
So, what's the favorite part of social studies for you? Is it civics? Is it history? Is it economics?
It's actually, yeah, it is government, and civics itself. Yeah. It's the state has, really, it's the American government and it's a half credit. It's not even the way like 20 years ago when I started, where it was a full like civics course. And I think that's unfortunate, but that is government. American government is my favorite thing to teach. So
It's amazing to me that a lot of students come into high school knowing very little about our government, how it operates, or how it's supposed to operate. And
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a unique last, I would say probably 8 to 10 years. Yeah, but they really don't know anything, and that's unfortunate also. And a lot of what I try to emphasize personally is why is it important that they know it.
yeah,
Like we do live in a time where you can Google anything basically, but to have it internalized as to why they should know it and why is it important to them, a lot of them don't realize that the protections that are afforded to us under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that it is irregardless of their age. So that things, that they hopefully they never have a run in with a law, but if they do, they are entitled to a lawyer also for their defense.
and,
Those kind of things that just kind of help grasp the why we're learning this and not just the what.
and it's amazing to me sometimes how gullible people are. Just because they read it on the internet does not
Yes,
necessarily mean it's true.
absolutely, absolutely.
So you
And
end up knowing what Google wants you to know.
the, yes, absolutely, and not yeah, and teaching that exact thing that because it's a TikTok that has no bearing on the truth. So, and it is going to take 30 more than 30 seconds to a minute to learn something, or to be able to process really what is going on, and that in our government itself, there's a lot of nuances that. Unfortunately, with a half credit course that's required by the state, it's not covering it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Uh, what what stood out to you about your first year of teaching?
Um, I think the thing that stood out to me the most was really that I got a lot of enjoyment out of working with high school kids. I felt like that's what I'd want to do, and then it became a realization, and that it was easy to stand up and talk to them about whatever the subject of the day was. Sorry, there they go. And but the I think that was the enjoyment I got, and that it almost we had a great time in room 200. That
Oh
was a
yeah,
lot of fun, and we I think that was a lot of it was making that connection and being able to have a discourse with them. They were old enough to understand what you were doing and to communicate like young adults.
yeah,
I didn't really have any interest in teaching the littles. I did know that I wanted to do high school, and so I think that was the biggest thing was just the the value I felt like I could bring, even if it was for we did what we could do with the time that we had with them, and some of that was academic, and some of that was also just social. Like
sure.
especially with freshmen, how to acclimate into high school and make it a good experience. Because it is different than middle school.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely different. And it does take them a little while to acclimate themselves. When did you think this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I would say I think it was in my late 20s. I had been out of school for about 5 years or so, and I felt like I did a good job, but I didn't feel the intrinsic value of my work that I was really looking for. And I'd done some schoolwork in college and right after college and not traditional environments. I was a Georgia governor's intern, and spent one summer working in the classroom with Dr. Renee Mallory at the Youth Detention Center. Those kind of things, and just being able to kind of think, I think planted the seeds some. And the environment I grew up in was uh, quite competitive as far as grades went at my house, especially as my parents went back, to school and got certifications or extra degrees. And there was never this like a negative kind of influence, always the expectation that we were to do our very best. But being in that kind of environment too, where like my parents even would, oh, I took that class. What did you make? What did I make? Kind of set you up like, you go and you go to do the best you can. So I think by about 5 years after graduating from college, I realized I really wanted something where I at the end of the day, I felt like I had added value to a broader society and not just kind of a smaller segment of finance. So
What do you think, what have you noticed are the primary difference in students today and students when you were in high school?
yeah, there's a lot. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with parental involvement. It is really where it starts. And a lot. I think when I was in high school, a lot of us were always worried, like if we messed up, would our parents find out? And so that was the ultimate thing. We were going to get in trouble at school, and we were also going to get in trouble at home.
Yeah.
And so without that type of reinforcement at home a lot, a lot of times it feels like now we're we're in a position where we're also having to fill a parental type role, in addition to teaching subject matters and behavioral skills and those kind of things. Whereas that expectation, at least when I was in high school, is that we came to school prepared to learn and that there was a consequence. If you didn't turn in work on time, it was not going to be accepted, and so it was, like, oh, well, I can't get a zero. I have to turn it in. The environment now is, well, did they get it in? Let's give them extensions and those kind of things. Where, and I don't know that that is really preparing students for the real world either because at work a deadline is a deadline. So I'm not sure that we're necessarily helping in that
No, I
way.
don't
But
think
that
we
is,
are.
yeah, that's kind of a big prevalent culture change also.
Yeah.
And then again, and students not really feeling like there's as much of a consequence at home if there is trouble at school.
And
So
there's a lack of accountability on both parts, I think. And I think that's unfortunate. When I was in fifth and sixth grade in elementary school, I began to believe that my mother had a psychic connection with my teachers.
yeah,
And there
yeah,
was something almost like, you know, in the atmosphere, and she could detect disturbances in the force, so to speak.
that's right.
But
That is exactly right. Yeah, and yeah. So
I'm
and that doesn't even mention the technology changes, which are a huge distraction to the learning process, and
what
or can be.
how do you handle cell phones in your classes?
Um, you know, at Chattahoochee County, we have a fairly strict cell phone policy. They are not to be out in class, and generally that rule is adhered. And different districts or schools I've been in, all of that really is administration down. If it's the administration's policy and it's going to be enforced school wide, then it is much easier as a teacher to enforce those policies. I have been at schools where it's been, well, we're going to let the teachers all decide.
Right,
And with that disparity, it does make it much more difficult classroom management when, one classroom has a set of rules than another classroom. Typically, we like, regardless of school, they've been a big distraction, and so we try to limit their use as much as possible. Nowadays, with if it's work time, we'll let them put headphones into their computer, or if they want to set a playlist, we're not changing songs every minute, but if they want to set a playlist and work to music, they can do that individually. But if it is any kind of engaging work, class discussion, anything like that, that I don't want to see them. I don't want them on the desk. I don't want them turned over. I just really don't want to see them at all. And like I said, that it really does help when it's a school-wide policy as opposed to a class policy.
what do your students that are in the work program, uh, what do their employers say about cell phones?
It is like a lot of them are on cell phone, like no cell phones. So for kind of that, and that's the majority of my day. For 3 blocks, is reinforcing that, while a phone is a tool. And so if you're using it to communicate with your work or to pull up, because a lot of employers do have now apps where kids
Yeah.
can check their schedule or log in days off, that's an appropriate use of the tool. If you're over on Snapchat, that is not an appropriate use of the tool. So, but most employers are, put it away. Just, so we're trying to build them for that expectation when they do enter the workforce. So,
I would imagine it's particularly hard for math teachers who, for years, always told us and our students, that you're not going to have a calculator everywhere you go.
yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, and then the world changed. Yeah, exactly.
that's right. So, are there any supports for new teachers that you've noticed that weren't around when you first started? Now,
Um,
I know the guys you started with, and I know the kind of support they gave and expected. And
absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I I think that in areas where I've seen it very successful, you do have kind of a traditional mentorship, but it's almost more of a team environment, where you can draw upon people who've got some experience. And that was, being on like still on the team teaching atmosphere that we were at Shaw. It was really helpful because different people have different strengths. And so to be able to draw on like a kind of a team support was really beneficial. And I think that's still, that human component of I'm not sure what to do here. How do I handle this situation? Or I don't know exactly what they're asking from me here. is really a benefit for a new teacher to be kind of put into almost like a group cohort rather than necessarily a one-on-one mentorship. Just because of that, some people are. I'm not a very good lesson plan writer. I will be 100% honest. I would not be the best person to come to for that, but I know people that are, and even I, tend to, if I get on a hiccup or something like, with that kind of thing. Whereas, I'm much more of the, I can get up and talk and work it and make up, different ideas, those kind of things. Relationship building with kids. That's where I feel like my skill set is. And so, I think having different people like that to draw on is really the most beneficial. I do remember when I started at Shaw that I was putting together like my grade book, and those none of the things that they teach you actually in class, and now there's so much more with all of the different programs and how they integrate. And I am very thankful that even though my master's is 22 years, no, almost 23 years old now, that I'm kind of dating myself, but having that kind of ability to see how things fit together has made it easier as the technology has changed and advanced, that it's a little bit easier for me to grasp than maybe some folks who either don't have a background or necessarily the interest or aptitude. We all cannot be good at the same things, and we shouldn't be. We do
Oh
need to
yeah, yeah,
complement each
yeah.
other. Yeah.
I,
So yeah, but
one of
I
the
think that
some of the most frightening times in my teaching were when I had, you know, stayed up most of the night trying to do a marching band thing, which for band directors, is sort of a lesson plan anyway. And
yes,
then, I discover after about 15 minutes that the things that look great on paper at 2 o'clock in the morning don't always translate well on the marching band field. And
yeah,
the learning to fly by the seat of your pants,
yeah.
so to speak, is part of the art of teaching, I think.
Yeah, I honestly do too, because you're right. You could spend hours, thinking this is gonna be great, and we're gonna do this, and either it takes like 7 minutes, and or that they were like this doesn't real I don't really get this, or it just doesn't work out, right? But so being able to like pivot really quickly and like, okay, guys, well, let's just work on it this way, or and not getting flustered,
Yeah,
because the kids look to you for that type of leadership, whether they want to tell you or not. But if you're cool, calm, and collected, they're gonna let you be in that leadership role. If you're flustered and don't at least, you can be a hot mess inside, but as long as on the outside you're coming across like it's gonna be all okay, guys. But if you let them see that flustery thing, that there's always going to be a few in the bunch that will try
well,
to
sure.
work that. Yeah,
Listen, students can read teachers and they
absolutely.
know how to push buttons
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
when. And
Uh-huh.
some are gifted.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very gifted at that. Not in necessarily the way that you want them to be gifted, but very gifted in that. But yeah,
Well, and there's always at least one in the classroom who's like a shark. If they smell blood in the water, they're coming after you.
that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I guess that goes back to too, when you're talking about like with new teachers, I think a lot of that kind of experience is, hopefully they're paired with somebody either, like with their student teacher, or they've observed somebody who really is good at that. But if they haven't had that type of exposure, just having somebody to kind of talk through, like, start off, much more firm. It's always easier to back off than it is to get like more strict.
Sure.
And just some of those kind of things, because yeah, you're right, there's the shark watching, to see how you're going to handle that first movement of something didn't go quite right. So I think a lot of that, again, is goes back to like for new teachers, some of the things that we can always teach you how to enter numbers in a grade book, but the human aspect of it is that's the variable, definitely.
So, have you seen any evidence in the places you've taught of a national teacher shortage?
Yes, absolutely. They it it appears to me that many of us are like, and it could be, but it appears to be many of us are aging. The average teacher age is older. There are not as many new teachers that are entering the field. Um, it's certainly anecdotal, but some of the education programs are closing. At least parts of them because they don't have students applying to be teachers.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the shortages that it's become pretty commonplace now that in two school districts and two different schools I've worked in the past 5 years, that there's not enough subs. You are going to cover somebody's class. So even trying to attract people that to sub, retired educators, they're not willing to come back into it. And the world changed a lot pre and post COVID. There was a teacher shortage going into it, but coming now on the other side of it, it is becoming more and more of a stark reality.
If you were queen of education for a week, what would be your solution to that problem?
I think I, I would restructure the way in which people can become a teacher. And and that doesn't mean necessarily like make it less rigorous as far as like you want to make sure content, educational philosophy and all that, but there are um people that I know, for instance, who really can't, they're educated, they're professionals, would like to be teachers, but can't take the reduction in pay in order to go back to a traditional program or even to do a program like the TAP program,
Yeah.
where they may have a degree, but to start somebody out who may be making, um, you know, twice as much as a new teacher is, it's difficult for somebody who may be in their 30s or their 40s to make that type of career change. And so I don't know that there's enough there to draw them. I think while we do have some great alternate pathways, I think that there should be more. And I think we do need to look and start taking into account, um, in a lot more fields of previous work experience to count towards those educator experiences and
Oh,
not
sure.
just, specific fields that the way that they have today. Because I do think that, even for me, I didn't start teaching until I was 33. So I'm a second career. And when I think about a lot of my colleagues, especially in the Shaw days, a lot of our department in social studies were second career people.
Sure.
And so it took us a little bit of time. And thankfully, I was in a situation where when I started at Shaw, I was able to take a 50% pay cut. But not everybody is able to take a 50% pay cut at 33. But to get the numbers to accommodate the need out there, it certainly is going to have to change. And especially as, like, in particular, the state of Georgia, we are pushing a lot of college and career academies with the trade programs like at Chattahoochee County, where we do have automotive and we've got welding and the CNA program and broadcast, but to attract those types of trade professionals into a classroom as opposed to working in the private sector or being their own business owners, you've got to offer a compensation package that is going to attract them and keep them if the state wants to continue to be like Georgia wants to be the place to work. And I think they've made some steps, but I think there's a lot more steps that could be made.
There are. And something else that almost every teacher mentions is administrative support. And a lot of teachers would continue to work even with the substandard pay if they felt like they had support in the classroom for student
Yes,
misbehavior. And
absolutely.
without that, it just makes it an impossible situation. And after just a couple of years of that lack of support, that's one reason I think we see such an enormous dropout rate among the first 5 years of teaching.
Yes, yes, I do too. I think, and I've thankfully been in a couple of different schools where I've had like really great administrative support. I have, it hasn't been as strong, and it makes a huge difference in how you feel about even just the quality of your own work, if you don't get that administrative support, you don't feel like, or at least I didn't necessarily feel like I was doing my best job of really connecting with the kids about the subject matter. If you're dealing with, a disturbance, and thankfully, I haven't had a lot of issues. But even the ones that I did have, I felt like if there had been maybe a little bit more support, to help rectify a situation, then I could have had more value. Like, again, that kind of intrinsic value. Like, I'd done a good day's work,
Yeah.
and done that. But I've been in great situations. I'm in a really great situation now, actually, and where I don't worry about that. If there is an issue, I do feel like if I need to, and thankfully, again, I don't have many problems. But if I did, I feel like I would be supported in helping rectify that. And that makes a world of difference.
Oh,
A
it
world
does,
of
doesn't
difference.
it? It really
Yeah,
does.
it really does.
So what are you going to be when you grow up?
I would like to be a travel agent. I know that sounds funny, but I would love to be a travel agent. I love traveling, and now that Wilson he started grad school today at Georgia Southern and wants to be a school psychologist. So here comes generation number four of educators. He doesn't want to be in the classroom, but he wants to be a school psychologist and have kind of a different role in the educational system, but still a very valuable one. And having kind of, today is day one of empty nester. And I've got a few years left before retirement, but I think that would be a fun job to have, where still had a lot of social engagement, but could get the benefit of traveling. My husband and I have started traveling a lot more, especially now that Wilson's a little bit older. He's 20 now. So, that I think that would be my dream job. I don't know if I'll do that or not, but I think that would be fun. I really have enjoyed like learning and I am still learning a lot about the work-based learning program, and just like it's a great feeling when, like, I had right before we got on this call, a kid that was texting me, and had come out of a job interview and felt like they had done really well. And so there's a lot of value in building up that type of success for a kid also, where they're excited enough not to wait to tell me at school tomorrow, but to send me a text to let me know how things have gone. So
That's
those kind of things, that's very rewarding as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
see, that's one of the reasons that we go into teaching to begin with. We just didn't know it when we started.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I did, going back to my parents, I had a great model of that. And I probably just didn't recognize it. I can remember coming out because I graduated from Shaw also, and coming in the door from Shaw in the afternoons. And at that point, mom was still teaching at Kendrick, before she came back to Shaw. And walking in the door, and there in the dining room would be one of my buddies, and my mom was teaching them Macbeth or Hamlet or something, that we were doing like in senior English. And I'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they're like, they're like, your mom's helping me. I'd be like, okay, So, even outside of that realm, I had an excellent example set by my parents for that. So,
That's great. That's great. Any last words of advice for prospective teachers or new teachers?
yeah, I think so. Like, I think it is an absolutely rewarding job. I think that the value, one of the more positive things I think I have seen out of the post-COVID world is that there is more recognition for teachers and the role that we play in society than maybe that there was before. People got stuck at home with their own children, day after day, and having my own children, and having worked at online teaching with Georgia Cyber Academy for 3 years. I was at home with my own child. I was in one room, he was in another room, and thankful I was able to do that with him. But it is a different experience when you're
It is.
trying to do the day in, day out with your kid on an educational level. And so I think that there is more of appreciation, like as a whole, that we do have a valuable role in society.
Yeah.
And that, so not to be afraid. Kids, working with kids is actually like the most rewarding job I've ever had. I